My mother called it a family obligation. That's the exact phrase she used. Not a request, not a favor, not even a polite suggestion. An obligation. As if I'd signed something years ago that I wasn't aware of. Some invisible contract that made me permanently available whenever the family needed a warm body in a chair. It was the Tuesday before Thanksgiving when she called. I was on my lunch break, eating leftover pasta at my desk at Millbrook Elementary, still wearing the lanyard with my ID badge that said Ms. Holloway, 3rd grade. I remember that detail because I kept twisting it around my finger while she talked, tighter and tighter. "We're thinking of doing something a little different this year," she said. Her voice had that particular lightness that I'd learned to distrust. The kind of lightness that meant something heavy was coming. Different how? "Your father and I are flying to Scottsdale with your brother and Melissa. They found a resort that does a whole Thanksgiving package, spa, golf. The dinner is supposed to be incredible." She paused. "We're leaving Wednesday morning." I waited. There was always a second part. "Grandma Bet can't travel anymore, you know that. Her knee is still not right after the surgery and the flight would be hard on her. Someone needs to be with her." There it was. "Mom, I already bought groceries. I was going to host." "Honey, you live alone. You were going to host yourself." That landed like a small slap. It wasn't wrong, technically. My apartment in Hamden is a one-bedroom on the 3rd floor of a building that smells faintly of someone else's cooking at all hours. My boyfriend and I had broken up in September. My best friend was going to her parents' place in Ohio. Yes, my Thanksgiving was going to be quiet. That didn't mean I wanted to spend it in my grandmother's house in Wethersfield, watching the parade alone while she napped, being the reason no one else had to feel guilty about leaving her. "What about Patrick?" I said. "My brother, 31 years old, a project manager at a construction firm, owns a 4-bedroom colonial in Glastonbury with a finished basement. He has space. He could bring her to Scottsdale with them, or stay. Patrick and Melissa have been planning this since August. It's already paid for." "My groceries are already paid for." Silence. Then, "Evelyn, she's your grandmother too." I went to Grandma Bet's house on Wednesday afternoon. I didn't call my mother back to say I would. I just went, because that's what I do. I packed a bag, put my groceries in a cooler, and drove 40 minutes up I-91, feeling the particular exhaustion of someone who has been voluntold for the 10,000th time and still showed up. My grandmother's house is a colonial on a street lined with maples that had mostly gone bare by late November. She's lived there since 1978. The same green shutters, the same stone bird bath in the front yard that she covers with a plastic bag every winter. When I pulled into the driveway, she was standing at the window. She does that, watches for people. I think she's been doing it her whole life. She met me at the door before I could knock. "I told them not to do this," she said immediately. She had her hands on my arms before I was even fully inside. "I told your mother I didn't need anyone, that I was fine." "I know, Grandma." "They treat you like a—" She stalked herself, pressed her lips together. She doesn't like to say unkind things about her own child. I've always respected that about her, even when it frustrated me. "It's okay," I said. "I'm here now." She looked at me for a moment, really looked, the way she does, like she's reading something in your face. Then she nodded. "I made chili," she said. "You hungry?" Her kitchen smelled like cumin and wood smoke. She had a fire going in the living room and the TV on low, one of those Hallmark movies where it's already snowing by the opening credits. I put my bag in the guest room, which still has the same yellow quilt that was there when I was 7, and I sat down at her kitchen table and ate chili and cornbread and thought, this is actually not terrible. My grandmother is 79 years old. She was a high school English teacher for 34 years, retired in 2011, and she has the kind of precise, careful way of speaking that you only develop from decades of explaining things to teenagers. She doesn't waste words. She doesn't perform. When she asks you how you're doing, she actually waits for the answer. That first evening we stayed up until almost 11, which is late for her. She asked me about the school, about my kids this year. I told her about a boy in my class, Marcus. Wait, I can't use that name. I told her about a student who had recently started reading after months of struggle, and how I had cried in my car afterward. She told me about a student she'd had in 1987 who wrote her a letter 10 years later saying her class had changed his life. "That's why you do it," she said. "Not for the paycheck." "Definitely not for the paycheck," I said. She smiled. "Your mother thinks you're wasting your degree." I know what my mother thinks. Your mother is wrong. I looked at her. She was refilling her tea, very calm, like she'd said something unremarkable about the weather. She loves you, Grandma Bet said. She measures things in dollars and prestige, and she's always done that. Her mother did the same to her, I'm afraid. She set the kettle down. That's not an excuse, just context. I thought about that for a long time after she went to bed. Thanksgiving itself was quieter than I expected it to be, which is different from lonely. There's a distinction there that I didn't fully understand until that day. Quiet can hold things. Quiet can be chosen. Lonely is something that's done to you. We cook together all morning. She has a system for the turkey that involves brining it overnight and buttering the skin with herbs she grows in small pots on her windowsill. Rosemary, sage, thyme. She let me do the mashed potatoes because, she said, I have a better hand for potatoes than anyone in the family. I have no idea if that's true, but I chose to believe it completely. My mother texted once, around noon, "Happy Thanksgiving, resort is beautiful, Grandma doing okay?" I typed back, "Yes, we're good." I put my phone face down after that. My brother texted a photo of a golf course, blue sky, perfect green, killing it out here, Cebolo L. I didn't respond. After dinner, while we were doing dishes, Grandma Bet asked me something she'd never asked before. Do you know what I sold the store for? She'd had a small kitchen and cookware shop on Main Street in Wethersfield for 22 years. My grandfather had started it. She'd kept it running after he died in 2003. She sold it in 2016, the year she turned 72. I'd known about the sale, but we'd never discussed the number. No, I said. $2.8 million, she said. The developer who bought the building wanted the business too. He was converting the block. She handed me a dish to dry. I didn't know what to do with it, honestly. I'd always just kept the money in savings, the way my parents taught me. But my accountant pushed me to invest. This was 2016. The market was, well, it's grown. I didn't know what to say. How much has it grown? She gave a small shrug, the kind that contains more information than it lets on. Enough, she said. More than I need. More than I ever expected. She looked at the window above the sink, where the yard was dark and cold. Your grandfather would have been amazed. He grew up with nothing. Your grandfather would have been amazed. He grew up with nothing. I thought I understood something in that moment, but I didn't. Not yet. I thought she was just sharing. Elderly people do that. They start telling you their histories as the years get shorter. I filed it away and went back to drying dishes. On Friday, she asked if I'd drive her somewhere, a law office, downtown Hartford. She said she had an appointment she'd been putting off. On the day after Thanksgiving? He keeps unusual hours, she said. He's an old friend. Does me a favor. I drove her. I waited in the lobby with a 2-year-old copy of Connecticut magazine while she was inside for about 45 minutes. When she came out, she looked lighter. That's the only word for it. Like something she'd been carrying had been set down. All done, she said. Everything okay? Everything is exactly as it should be, she said. Let's get coffee. We got coffee. She ordered a slice of pecan pie and ate the whole thing and seemed deeply satisfied about it. We drove back to Wethersfield in comfortable silence. I thought about the pile of ungraded papers waiting for me at home, the parent emails I'd been avoiding, the cost of replacing my car's brake pads that I'd been postponing since October, my salary as a third-grade teacher in Connecticut, $47,000 that year. My fourth year did not accommodate a lot of postponing. On Saturday morning, she found me in the kitchen making coffee and sat down at the table. I want to tell you something, she said, and I want you to listen without doing that thing where you argue before I finish. I don't do that. She looked at me. Okay, I said, I'm listening. I updated my will yesterday, she said. I want you to know that, because I think it would be cruel for you to find out later in a room full of people without any warning. I set my coffee mug down. Grandma. You're listening, remember? I closed my mouth. Your mother and your father are comfortable. They will be fine. Patrick and Melissa are comfortable. They will also be fine. She folded her hands on the table. I'm not going to live forever, and I am not going to pretend that everyone in this family has treated you the same way. I see what I see. I've been seeing it for years. She paused. I left the house and the bulk of the estate to you. Your mother and Patrick will each receive a portion. Meaningful, not nothing. But the rest is yours. I opened my mouth, closed it, opened it again. Don't cry, she said. I'm not, my voice broke. Why? Because you came, she said simply. Not just this week. You came every time. You drove me to my post-surgery appointments when your mother was busy. You called on Sundays. You remembered that I like the pens with the fine tips, not the medium. And you brought me a box without being asked. She reached across the table and put her hand over mine. You showed up. That's not a small thing, Evelyn. That is the whole thing. I couldn't speak for a while. We sat there while the coffee got warm and the Friday morning light came through the kitchen window. I don't know what to say, I finally managed. You don't have to say anything. I just wanted you to know ahead of time, so it wasn't a shock. It's still a shock. Yes, she agreed, but a different kind. I drove home Saturday afternoon. I sat in my car in my apartment's parking lot for about 15 minutes before I could go inside. Not because I was upset, I can't quite explain it. It was more like I needed a moment to let the shape of things rearrange themselves. The world looked slightly different than it had 4 days ago, and I needed to adjust to the new dimensions. I told no one. Not my best friend in Ohio, not my coworker who I sometimes eat lunch with. No one. It felt like something that would change shape if I said it out loud too soon, like those paper cranes that fall apart if you unfold them to show someone. My grandmother called on Sunday evenings. She always had. We talked for 40 minutes about her neighbor's new dog and a documentary she'd watched about the Hawaiian Islands and whether third graders were learning cursive anymore. Normal things. Her voice sounded good. 6 months later, she died. It was quiet, and it was fast, and her doctor said it was her heart, that she'd known for some time that it was wearing out, though she hadn't told us. She was in her house. The bird bath was uncovered by then, full of April rainwater. I was the one who drove to Wethersfield when the call came, and I was there before anyone else. I sat with her for a little while before the others arrived. I don't know if I believe in anything, but I talked to her anyway. The attorney's name was on a card she'd given me that Friday, tucked into my coat pocket with a post-it that said, just in case. I called him the week after. He was not surprised to hear from me. He had a kind, even voice, and he explained things clearly, and when he told me the total value of the estate, my vision went briefly white at the edges. After paying taxes, covering the bequests to my mother and Patrick, and accounting for the property in existing accounts, what remained for me was just under $3.1 million. The house alone appraised at $480,000. The investment accounts had grown considerably in the 9 years since 2016. She'd been right. More than she'd expected. I didn't tell my mother before the reading. I want to be honest about that. I could have. There was a week between when I knew and when we all sat in the attorney's office in Hartford. My mother, my father, Patrick, Melissa, and me in a conference room that smelled like new carpet and coffee from a machine. I chose not to tell them. I've thought about whether that was kind, and I've decided it wasn't meant to be kind. It was meant to be true. The will said what it said. There was no version of that meeting where telling them ahead of time would have changed the document or changed the outcome. It would have only given them time to pressure me, to ask me to disclaim, to make me feel guilty for something my grandmother chose freely with her own mind. So I let the attorney read it. My mother's face when she heard her portion, $50,000 and the china set, did something I will carry for a long time. It wasn't the money that hit her. I think she understood, somewhere under the shock, that it was a message, that my grandmother had seen and measured and decided. Patrick said, there has to be a mistake. The attorney said there was no mistake. Melissa put her hand on Patrick's arm. My mother turned to me. Her expression was something I had never seen on her face before. Not anger, not grief exactly. More like the moment when someone realizes a story they've been telling about themselves for years isn't the true version. She planned this, my mother said. It wasn't an accusation. It was almost quiet. I know, I said. Thanksgiving. Yes. She looked at the table for a long moment. Then she gathered her things with great dignity and walked out, and my father followed her, and Patrick and Melissa followed him, And I sat in that conference room with the attorney and the carpet smell and the sound of the building's HVAC system, and I breathed. The drive home from Hartford takes about 35 minutes on a good day. I made it in something like 45 because I kept having to blink. Not from sadness, from the specific overwhelm of realizing that someone saw you, really saw you, every small ordinary act of showing up, and that it mattered, that it was enough, that you were enough. My mother called 3 weeks later. We had a long, hard conversation that I won't summarize because it deserves more than a summary. It was complicated, it was painful. There were things said on both sides that were true and things that were not. At the end, she said, "I just wish she had talked to me." And I said, "She talked to you for 30 years, Mom. You just weren't always listening." And she didn't have an answer for that. We still talk on some days sometimes. It's different now. A little more careful, a little more honest, which is probably what it should have been all along. I still teach 3rd grade. I got a small raise last year, $52,000 now. The inheritance is in accounts that my own financial advisor manages. I paid off my student loans in one morning, sitting at my kitchen table in my pajamas with a cup of coffee, which was one of the stranger experiences of my life. I'm saving the rest. I bought my grandmother's green potted herbs when we cleared the house, the rosemary, sage, and thyme from the kitchen windowsill. They're on my own windowsill now, in my apartment, and I have not managed to kill them yet, which feels like a kind of proof. Last November, the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, my phone rang. It was my mother. Her voice had that particular lightness. "We were thinking of doing something different this year," she said. I let her finish the whole sentence before I answered. "I'm staying home this year," I said. "I'm hosting myself. I'm making turkey, and I'm doing the brine, and I'm going to eat dinner by my window, and it is going to be wonderful." A pause. "Oh," she said. "Okay." "You're welcome to come if you want to," I added, because I meant it. "Patrick too. I have room." She came. Patrick didn't. My mother and my father sat at my table in my small apartment, and I made the turkey with the herb butter the same way my grandmother taught me, and we ate it, and nobody said anything about the past. And when my mother complimented the potatoes, I told her Grandma Bet had always said I had a good hand for potatoes. My mother was quiet for a moment, then she said she was right. And I thought, yes, she usually was. I keep the rosemary on the left, the sage in the middle, the thyme on the right, exactly the way my grandmother kept them. Some mornings I stand at the sink making coffee, and I look at those 3 small pots and I think about cause and effect. Not in any mystical sense. Just the plain honest math a bit. What you put in is what eventually comes back. My grandmother didn't leave me her estate because I was her favorite, or because she felt sorry for me, or because she wanted to send a message to my mother, though I think, in the end, it did all 3 of those things. She left it to me because over 20-something years, through every small ordinary moment, I had shown her who I actually was. The Sunday calls, the fine tip pens, the drive to the post-surgery appointments when everyone else was busy. None of those things felt significant when I was doing them. They felt like just what you do, what a decent person does. That's the part that took me a long time to understand. Character isn't the big dramatic moments. It isn't what you do when someone is watching or when there's something to gain. It's what you do on a Tuesday when nobody's keeping score and the answer would be easier than the right thing. My mother is not a bad person. I want to be clear about that. But she spent years measuring life in dollars and status and convenience. And she made choices accordingly. And those choices accumulated into a story that her own mother could read plainly. We don't get to write our own reputations. Other people are always watching, even when we think they aren't. I think about what it took for my grandmother to do what she did. She was 79 years old. She had outlived her husband by more than 20 years. She had run a business alone, managed her own finances, raised a family. She didn't need anyone's permission or approval to make that decision. She had spent 8 decades building the kind of mind that could look at a situation clearly, without sentimentality, without self-deception, and act on what she saw. That kind of clear-eyed honesty about the people you love is harder than it sounds. It would have been easier for her to divide everything equally and let everyone feel comfortable. She chose truth over comfort. That took something. And then there's the part that I keep coming back to, the part that is maybe the hardest lesson in all of it. I almost didn't go. I stood in my apartment on that Tuesday with my grocery bags and my bruised feelings, and I thought about saying no. I thought about it seriously. And I went anyway. Not because I expected anything. Not because I was playing a long game, but because showing up for the people who matter to you is just who I was trying to be. The reward, if you want to call it that, wasn't the money. The reward was the week itself. The chili. The fire. The dishes. The conversation that went until 11. That was already enough. Everything else was just my grandmother, one last time, paying attention.